of tonight's broadcast was the beauty of suffering, and I really want to talk about this from a point of absolute of beauty. Okay, now let me explain what I mean by this, because here's the thing. When you go through some kind of transformation, when something finally doesn't just change in you, it transforms in you. It's like you couldn't even help what went on and you just come out of it the other side. Not even what I'd call totally different, literally feeling like you're reborn. Good morning, NYC. I'm guessing that's New York City. Good morning to you, all from right across the other side of the world. It's good evening over here, but good morning to you. So here's what happens, right? So the transformation where everything is just everything you've ever held on to that's prevented that transformation leading up to that point, it just collapses. Here's what happens, okay? Those transformations don't come when something is added to our life, when everything gets greater and more beautiful and more exciting. That's not when those things happen. You ask anyone who's been through any form of transformation, read any biography from the rags to riches, or the rise and the fall kind of story or whatever, and it always takes place when loss occurs, when content is removed from our life, when something is taken away, when we experience loss. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of loss you're talking about. We could be talking about loss at the physical level, in the way of, possessions, a status in society, people, when people die and we lose people, or relationships, when things, like that dissolve. Or we can be talking about, a mental loss where all of a sudden nothing makes sense anymore. All those belief systems have just collapsed and nothing matches up, nothing lines up, and you get to this point where you feel more lost for a little while because everything that ever existed doesn't make sense now. And this is the process that takes you through to the higher self, really starts connecting you, because because what happens through this process is, as things are being taken away, if you just joined us, we're talking about how it's only when things are taken away, when we experience loss, when something dissolves in us, that we begin to experience transformation, not when things are added, are added to our life. So during this process, the end of suffering doesn't come as an enhanced sense of self, but more as a diminished sense of self. It comes through loss, and all of a sudden, the suffering, and gets so deep, and it gets, it gets so hard, whether it's a mental level or a physical level, that I want you to write this down. The suffering eventually drives you to the point of collapse. That's what happens. As things are being taken away and belief systems are just literally being crumbled and shattered and dissolved, and everything we ever clung on to, every identity we ever attached ourselves to, doesn't make sense anymore, and we just can't hold on to those things anymore because they're just not lining up. At that point, transformation takes place. It's almost like the suffering gets so bad, it rips a hole in the fabric of your life. Imagine your life is this fabric, and it rips this hole. It's almost like this violent ripping experience where everything around you becomes turbulent, and and emotionally, there's a whole lot of turmoil, and it rips this hole in the fabric of your life. But here's what happens. It is in that very ripping, it is in that very hole that has now been ripped open through what you have lost, through what you are suffering. It is that very hole that the light gets in. That's it. And there's no other way sometimes for the light to make its way in other than a collapse of everything that already existed, and that is a very painful process. You experience this massive intensity of suffering. That's all I can relate it to, is suffering. But that is the beginning. That is the seed that produces the transformation. On the other side of that, it's not a process. It's like, boom, it just happens. This hole is ripped in the fabric of your life. And here's what happens. At some point in all of our lives, the hole gets torn in our fabric. If it doesn't experience through the journey of your life, it happens at the end when exactly. Rock bottom. This is my personal philosophy on rock bottom. All right. I always wanted to write a book, and I've still got the title. And don't go stealing this. All right. But it's called. I want to write this book one day. Sometime in the next 18 months, called The Upside of Rock Bottom. And I want you to imagine this. Let's say you jump in off a 10-meter tower, and you jump in off a 10-meter tower into a diving pool. If the moment you hit the water, you resist those forces, you resist the forces of the pool that that has taken you to the bottom of the pool, and you resist those forces, and you try to swim back against the currents and reverse your direction and swim to the top, it takes so much effort, and you barely, you get to the top of that water and you gasp for that breath of air. Like, it feels like you barely even made it to the top. But here's what happened. Here's the other alternative. If you jump off that same tower from that same height, and this time you accept the process, all you do is you give up resistance. That's all you're doing. You don't have to even know what to do. Just give up resistance. Just don't go against the flow. Don't go against the currents. Let yourself go with the flow. Accept what is. Guess what happens? With no effort at all, you sink so easily to the bottom. And if you can touch the bottom, you've got something to push off. And when you've got something to push off, you get to the top in seconds with a whole lot of air left in your lungs. And so you're not burnt out through the process. You've got a whole lot of life left in you. And it didn't even take much effort. And the difference wasn't the height you jumped from. The difference wasn't the forces against you. The difference was you let yourself hit rock bottom. You gave up resistance. That's all that you did. And here's what happens. Right before that hole is ripped in the fabric of your life, right at the end of your suffering, the pain is the greatest. All right. Everything that, there is a law. There is a law in the universe that states that in order for something to come in, something first must die. There must be space before it. There's like this vacuum effect. You can't have something come in and then remove. You've got to have something die in order to have something come in. And we spoke about that last week. But it's like giving birth, for those, I haven't even had, and here's the thing, you don't have to have given birth to understand the birth process. The pain is the worst right before the birth. Right as the baby's crowning. You're right there. That's when the pain's the worst, right? And that is the same with everything that we must give birth to, and everything that we, every suffering, there has to be that final moment, that intensity where everything just collapses. Okay, your belief systems, all of the stuff, thank you very much, all the stuff you've been holding on to, all the identities that you have associated yourself with that aren't even you, but you've just had this association, this addiction to them, and you've literally learned to live through those addictions. So I want to close out tonight, essentially the message tonight is that there is a beauty in suffering, and the key to it is acceptance. That's all it is, because when you can accept the process and trust in something greater than you, you're able to give up resistance. That's all it takes to get through suffering to transformation. Instead of just going through suffering and never finding transformation, and you feel like you're just always stuck in this little suffering cycle, the reason you keep coming back through that cycle, you don't get to the other end of it, is because you're resisting the forces. You've got to just give up the resistance, just accept, and stop trying to hold on to things that need to be let go of. There is a beauty in that suffering, and you just have to believe it, and you just have to trust it. Now, here's what I did at the the Life Purpose Workshop. Listen, if this is making sense to you, you guys know the deal, right? You guys have been using Periscope long enough now. If this is making sense to you, give me some love. Let me know that, hey, this is making sense, Holly. I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you. Ask me, if it's not, ask me some questions. Let's interact here. And if it is making sense, go ahead and double tap your screen, double tap, double tap, double tap. And according to how much you believe this is making sense or how much value you're getting from this, you go ahead and tap your screen. All right, this is where you get to participate as well. And so at the Life Purpose Workshop that I ran in Adelaide a couple weeks, I shared what I call the 7 rewards of pain, and I want to share them with you right now. Okay, and write these down. If you haven't got a pen, you got to start getting a pen before you jump on Periscope. All right, but here's what they are: they're the 7 rewards of pain that only pain can offer. Okay, so I want you to see a beauty in pain and in the suffering after tonight, and understand that you only get everyone wants the breakthrough, but nobody wants to have the breakdown. But in order to have the breakthrough, you must first have the breakdown. You must first have the suffering before you get the transformation. And so here's what I believe the 7 rewards of pain are. We're going to finish on this tonight. Here's what pain does. Pain forces you to look. Think about that. Pain is the thing. Pain, not pleasure, pain forces you to look. It makes you look for answers. It makes you start questioning what you currently believe and and who it is you say you are. Pain is what instigates that whole process. If it's not painful to you, you'll never go through that process. And if you don't go through that process, you'll never evolve. And guess what? You don't come here to just get to a particular level of expansion and just stop there. You're here to continuously evolve. That's what you signed up for before you even got here. Right? So it forces you to look. Second thing, it forces you to lean. Pain is what forces you to lean on the idea, on the belief, and on the faith that there is something greater than you. You call it what you like. You can call it Buddha, you can call it God, you can call it Jesus, you can call it Source, you can call it consciousness. I don't care what title you give it. But pain is what forces you to lean on something that is greater than you, on the plan that's a whole lot bigger than ours. Pain also, number 3, pain forces you to learn. It's pain that forces you to learn some lessons, to be able to look back and to see where you've gone wrong, to be able to admit some mistakes, and to be able to, let those behaviors or habits or payoffs or whatever it was that created that in the first place. Pain is what gets you to let that dissolve. It's the thing that makes you give it up. Pain does that. Nothing else does. If it doesn't hurt, you won't give it up. You'll stay attached to the same belief systems, and guess where they get you? Right where you are. You're not here to stay where you are. You didn't come this far to only come this far. Right? So it forces you to look. It forces you to lean. It forces you to learn. Number 4, pain forces you to long. You start longing for a healing. You start longing for something that doesn't feel like this anymore. You start longing, not just, wanting and hoping. You start longing for a healing that can only come from a place that's higher than you. In order to get that healing that you long for, you got to reach some higher places in yourself. Pain forces you to long for that. Pain forces you to listen. It's pain that gets you to pay attention. If it doesn't hurt, you keep doing what you're doing. The universe has no other way to get your attention. So pain forces you to listen to the inner voice, to listen to whatever it is that you believe is speaking to you, to listen to your own consciousness, to start to become aware of what are the thoughts that belong to your brain and what's the intuition that belongs to your soul. Pain is what gets you to listen to the difference in those voices and to be able to discern which one is which. Pain does that. You don't have pain, you'll never learn that, I guarantee. Pain forces you to love. It forces you to love what remains. Pain breeds the seed to, I always say that, gratitude is the seed for more. But pain is what births that seed. It's what gives us, it gives us a reason to be able to love what's left. Because all of a sudden, through loss, through things being dissolved, through things that leave our life, we now go to a deeper level of appreciation for what remains. Pain forces that. It forces us to love what remains. And finally, pain, when it gets bad enough, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing, then you'll change. So we know what pain does? Pain forces us to let go. If it doesn't hurt bad enough, we won't let go. You know why? Because when you let go of what causes that pain, with that pain, you also let go of the payoffs. You let go of whatever, the victim mentality that went with it. You've got to start taking responsibility. Now, all these things, which is sometimes why we hold on to pain. Because if I let go of that, if I let go of that story, if that's no longer my past because I no longer see it like that, who would I be without that story? That's the story. That's the victim story. That's the suffering that I get love for. Because when I tell people about my suffering, that's when I get their attention. That's when they offer me their energy. That's when they give me their love. That's where I feel like I'm important, like I'm valued, like I'm somebody, and like somebody cares. The suffering is what gives me access to all those things that I need. So if I give up the suffering, I give up all of that. What will they love me for then? What will I be valued for then? What will make me important, and why would people care for me if I didn't have a story of suffering to tell? So sometimes those payoffs are the reason we hold on to it. But when it gets bad enough, when the pain of holding on to it becomes greater than the pain of letting go of those payoffs, you'll let go. And once you let go, the hole is ripped in the fabric of your life and the light gets in. And that's the moment where, you hear people's story. They say, that's where I found God. That's where I realized who I really was. That's where my consciousness came to me. That's where my Buddha nature entered me. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't care what your religion is. The principles we're talking about are all the same. It happens through suffering, through loss. And it's only through deep enough suffering that we allow, or that when the intensity of the suffering gets bad enough, everything collapses. When everything collapses, we find ourselves and the light gets in. So that's my message for you tonight. Come on over, if you haven't already, join the Facebook group, UNBECOME Spiritual Expansion is what the name of it is. Go to Facebook, UNBECOME Spiritual Expansion. And there's a whole lot of incredible things that get shared in there, inspirational little quotes and some conversations that go on. So if you did get anything from tonight, if something resonated, if you were on here, if you already know, oh my gosh, the universe led me, this was the message I needed tonight, this, now, if anything like that happened, you got to share it, because you don't understand that there's a seed in your story that can produce a harvest for someone else. So make sure that, if you do get breakthroughs, if you do get revelations, don't hold them on to yourself. Once they become your fruit, you got to serve with that fruit. You've got to make that available for someone else to find their hope in your story sometimes. And you can't measure the ripple effect that sometimes just sharing your story has on lives of everyone else. So, as I always say, guys, don't just get off Periscope tonight and roll back into the life you had before you got here. If you think that you can get off this Periscope the same person you were before you got on here, with the same belief systems, with the same thought processes, with the same payoffs, with the same habits, if you think you can get off here tonight the exact same person you were when you got on and have something different happen in your life, get closer to your breakthrough, get closer to finding the real you, then you're kidding yourself. I mean, this whole thing's a joke. So make sure you don't, as you depart from here tonight, don't just go with who you were before you got here. Depart from here tonight with the courage to believe in a better way, the courage to voice what you've got to say, the courage to thrive when times are tough, and above all else, the courage to know you are good enough. Good night, everyone.